it was very important for us to understand and clearly understand like the expectations from each of these team members as to what it is that they wanted to grow in. And once we kind of like aligned on that, then we were able to fit them into the right roles.
Welcome back to Neuroconvergent Leadership, where we talk about effective communication and leadership, especially in the STEM workplace. I'm Jeremy Doran, and I love helping engineers make the transition into management and effectively leadership. Today, we have a special guest, Kumar Emmarilli. Hope I pronounced that correctly. Kumar is a Chief Technology Officer. Welcome.
Thank you, Jeremy. Pleasure to be on this podcast.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. And I called you a Chief Technology Officer because that is one of the things that's listed. Can you explain a little bit more about what it is that you do?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm one of the co-founders as well as the CTO at Acto. Under my purview falls, of course, software engineering. I'm an engineer at heart and as well as at the company via my skill, but also oversee the product vision, execution of the product vision. The product and engineering falls under my purview. I also wear the hat of the Chief Information Security Officer. So being in life sciences industry, there's a lot of regulatory and compliance that the software needs to adhere to. So that falls under my purview as well. And finally, also wear the hat of the IT leader at the company, where the internal IT and the software governance falls under my purview as well.
That's a lot of hats.
Yes.
And how many people at the company and how many report to you?
Yep. At the high time, we were close to about 200 full-time employees. And now after a little bit of correction, we're close to 120 full-time, I would say. Okay. And out of the 120, there's about 50 to 55 people that are in my organization, under my org. And direct reports are about 7 of them.
Okay, great. So you have managers reporting to you?
That's correct. So I have directors and team leads that are usually reporting to me.
Perfect. And tell us a little bit more about how you got there, how you made the transition from being a software engineer into management and now leading managers.
Yeah, so that was, of course, lots of learning across the way. Started off as patient zero, I would say, on engineering, where I started coding the app myself, built the bones, the architecture of the platform, brought on some like-minded engineers that were thinking like me and that had the same technical approach as me, as my engineers number 1, 2, 3, who I'm happy to share now in the company, wear the hat of director of engineering as well as our lead architects. Great. So good to see some of the early engineers grow with the company. So that was great. But my growth as a leader was to lead from the front, an example for my team members to follow. At the same time, over time, learning the art of communicating succinctly, clearly, with simplicity, rather than complicating things for my team. How do I simply break down my expectations of them? How do I simply break down the targets? How do I simply break down the projects? The most ironic thing is the simplicity is the hardest thing to achieve. So that's what took time. And yeah, it's been a very exciting journey. And to get to this team size, of course, we had to go through tons of transitions, lots of folks coming on, leaving the company, and also us letting go of them just because the fit wasn't there. So a lot of learnings along the way as I grew.
Yeah, simplicity is not easy. To get things boiled down where you just hit the prime point without the extraneous is time consuming. It's hard to do. What kinds of complications were you adding in the beginning, and how did you figure out that it was a problem and then how to streamline?
Yeah, so great question. Interestingly enough, I say this to other fellow co-founders and other podcasts, whatever I've done. Startups in the last decade have gone through something very significant in COVID and in market dips and startup reevaluations. So there was a lot that happened condensed in last 10 years. And I feel like COVID has been one of those pivotal events that happened in everyone's lives, including startups, and majority of it startups, because pre-COVID, everyone was in office, in person. War room sessions were having in person, and there's something about in person where communication doesn't break down as much because you're just there, you're in the office, you're like together, and you could just jump into a meeting room, solve problems. But then post COVID, since everything became remote, yes, there was no commute and we were more effective and efficient with our time, but being virtual started creating silos in communication and breakdown and barriers. So to answer your question succinctly, the challenge in the beginning was, hey, you know what? Like everything was in person. We could have easily solved a complex problem, just jump into a meeting room. To everything virtual. You have to now jump on a Zoom for every little problem that you have. You don't have and then sometimes the body language on the camera is not the same as in-person body language. So there was a lot of challenge there. But the learnings, Jeremy, to be candid, to get to the simplicity was everything in the beginning was just, hey, let's just do a 30-minute meeting or an hour meeting or like 2-hour meeting. So it's like war room meetings for solving even simple problems. And then eventually getting to a point where you have the faith and the trust in your team members to solve complex problems, just leaving it up to them, not micromanaging, and just effectively, again, communicating the expectation and then letting them live up to it, right? So some of those things were learnings along the way, which came about post COVID in a virtual environment. How do you kind of really set your expectations? And now towards like a hybrid where we're now in office once a month and virtually for the rest of the week kind of thing, right? So that was kind of like the progress from pre-COVID to post-COVID to like, lots of meetings to less meetings and letting them actually do work. And almost like, our Tuesdays and Thursdays are like no meeting days where we just are only working. So there's a lot of learnings along the way as we figured out what works for us.
It is interesting when you try to empower people to take responsibility for solving a thing on their own. They're not always excited about it. Sometimes they want to keep you involved and nudging them along the way. It's not too many people who really just want to embrace it without kind of being pushed.
Correct.
So did you see that, and what were things that you did in order to help people or force them to start taking?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually, Jeremy. I really think, and you nailed it. I think that there are some people that are just born to lead. There are some people that are born to execute. There are some that are born to manage, right? So it's very important as an effective leader to read people and to understand what it is that they're trying to achieve. Some in my team that have been with the company just wanted to be an incredible executioner. So like execute every incredible like project. They can drive the strategy, they can drive the tactics, they can drive the operations, and they're just incredible at executing. But then they never wanted to grow into like a managerial position and take on that responsibility. But there were some that were, I would say, around 80% in execution, but then incredible at managing people and just wanted to grow. And then finally, there were a few that just want to live at the strategy level and like let others operate and execute on the tactics. So as a leader, it was very important for me to understand which person wanted to grow in one of these three types of roles. Once I understood that, I started not force fitting, extra duties on these particular folks. And in learning these, we've lost a few leaders, good leaders. In learning this, we've lost a good few engineers. But along the way, we kind of figured out what really works. So going back to your question, it was very important for us to understand and clearly understand like the expectations from each of these team members as to what it is that they wanted to grow in. And once we kind of like aligned on that, then we were able to fit them into the right roles. So, for example, my lead architect does not want to have any team members reporting to him, just wants to like execute while they just work with the technical leads and like, work on the technical approach, but they didn't have any reporting people under them. But then we hired an engineering manager whose sole responsibility was to just manage our technical leads. So kind of figured out what worked there, and it bear fruits for us.
It's interesting and impressive that you can do that, because most companies, the only way you can move up is to become a manager. So people who are excellent engineers are good enough, and the only thing they can do is now become a manager. And that's not for everybody. It's definitely
Correct.
a learnable skill.
Correct.
But some people are going to take to it and enjoy it, and some people are just not. I think it's just assumed by a lot of people that the way to get promoted is to become a manager.
Correct.
So I don't think a lot of people have stopped to think, is that something I want to do? They just kind of go along because it's the expected flow.
Correct. Exactly. No, absolutely. You nailed it. Yeah, it's been, and now we have a people and culture team. Which is our HR team. And as we grew beyond the 50 people count, we realized that, hey, you know what? We need to focus on what kind of a culture are we building at Acto, which is our company. And we needed to ensure that the culture doesn't get tainted as people come and go. And why that is important is for this reason that you're sharing, which is sometimes, if your culture is to just be empathetic, be human, be a problem solver. So if some of these are in your DNA, sometimes you tend to overlook internally within the company. You're always trying to say, okay, I'm going to solve all of these for my customers. I'm going to solve all of these for my partners. But then you tend to overlook the challenges that your internal team members are actually having. So it was important for us to bring in our, head of people and culture who would look inward and make sure that our teams are also, we're being empathetic to our teams, we're being empathetic to our people, we're helping solve problems for our team members, which will then in turn lead to solving problems for our customers, right? So it was an interesting journey there, and I strongly recommend any startup growing over 50 to definitely not overlook their people and culture team and get someone that can manage their human resources.
So how do the people in HR interact with the rest of the people in the company? Are they kind of working with the managers and helping them, or are they working with individuals, or is it a combination?
It's a combination of both. Of course, there's a direct line of communication for everyone in the organization to the HR. So that right off the bat, becomes a sounding board for anyone that does have something that they want to express. But then more importantly, you now have someone in a role that is solely focused on inner engineering of how people are working within the organization. Sometimes, for founders, because they're so ruthless in execution for always growing the business, some founders innately work through people. Some founders, because they're such ruthless executioners, tend to overlook people. Mm-hmm. And for them, more so than the founders that work through people, it's important to bring on someone whose sole responsibility is human capital. Sole responsibility is to manage people. So we realized that over time that, look, our strengths are to go out and talk to the world about what we do. And then our strength is not spending time, carving out time to focus on people. So let's actually get someone that can do that. And we ended up getting, an incredible person that can do that. So yes, that person works through the managers, through the reporting managers, and also directly to the team. They're spending time with quarterly initiatives, monthly initiatives, especially during this hybrid environment, bringing the team together when necessary, social events, cultural events, talking about when there should be holidays. We have these days called Be Human Days during the summer. When there is a long weekend, we give an extra day, making it 4-day weekend. So things like that. This is the people person that is really bringing out the best in the people, and that's their sole job, while we just focus on ruthless execution. So that's the way we kind of set it up. And I think for companies, they have to realize, the founders have to realize, and the leaders have to realize, are they going to work through people, or are they going to work ruthlessly on executing the business milestones?
It's kind of having a checks and balances within the company.
Correct.
And you tell me again what you call that department?
So we call it people and culture. I mean, of course, at the end of the day, it's HR, human resources team, right? But we call it people and culture because we strongly believe that culture and establishing a good working culture is everything in a small startup. And up until you hit like about 150 to 200 people, I still think that founders and their first degree CXO team have a strong hold and a strong grip on the culture of the company. Yeah, so that's why we call it people and culture.
So once you've identified the culture that you want, actually, I guess I have a question. How do you identify the culture that you want? And then once you've identified that, how do you propagate it throughout the whole company?
Yeah, great question. So every startup's culture does form from the founding team. The three of the founders of Acto, so all three of us were roommates in our university days. And and of course, we're very good friends. So we've somehow translated friendship into incredible camaraderie as fellow entrepreneurs and as well as fellow founders. So we figured out the balance between how do you balance the personal and the business? Where do you hold each other accountable? Where do you drop the egos and like just do what's right for the business? So culture, I really think, stems from you and the founders understanding how you build the company, what roles and what departments. So we kind of identified what are our core values. And the core values that we have, there are 5 core values for the Acto. So we are being human to any situation, being a painkiller. So being a painkiller meaning, problem solving. We are always like customer centric. So being in the industry, like, we're customer centric, and we're driven by, regulations and governance within the life sciences industry. And then finally, we are solution driven mindset. So meaning like any meetings that we come into, we're always coming with like solutions versus coming with problems. So, and these kind of core values are important. And the way to kind of enforce these is through, from the top down, living through them on a day-to-day basis. You can't have these core values sit on the wall or like in a PowerPoint presentation. You have to embody these in a day-to-day. So for example, being human, this is a prime example that I share with almost all the founders. During COVID, when the market was crumbling, like people were uncertain what's going to happen with like businesses. During that time, I remember we were about like 180 people, and we made a strong stance, including the founders, that, hey, no matter what happens during this COVID period, we're not going to let go of anyone, regardless of what the situation is. We will all take a hit on whether that's salaries or whether that's like bonus payments or whatever it is, starting from the top especially, but we will not let go of any single person during this COVID time. So we've kind of maintained that, and that was one, like, being human approach. And it's not just our core value living on, like I said, on a website or like on the wall. And every single one that was there during that period has pledged allegiance to the company for the rest of their life. Those people are still faithful and like they're still with the company. So that's something that we kind of took pride in. And that is something that a lot of the founders sometimes say it, but they don't act on. But we did. And it really like paid off, I would say, right? So that's one example. And similarly others where if we have like a meeting, we make sure that we first question, do we need an hour for this meeting, or like do we just need 30 minutes? If yes, can you come into the meeting just stating the problem, but then more so coming with solutions than like stating the problem, right? So some of these things like kind of we embody them in our day-to-day activities, and that's the real way to build a culture in the company. You can't just like, you can't just write about it. You have to like act it, right? So, and that's what we do.
Yeah, it's not easy to stick to it. And it's that type of dedication to your values and people knowing what to expect.
Correct.
That really makes people happy. I always say people would rather have a boss that they don't like, but is consistent and they know what to expect, than a boss that they like that is inconsistent.
Absolutely. And Jeremy, our head of people and culture, whenever we're bringing on someone new to the company, definitely now in their interview process goes through and identifies, are they a culture fit into the company? And they're looking at these elements. Does the person coming in have some of these elements in their, just personal behavior kind of thing?
Great. And you have managers reporting to you. Were they promoted from within, or did you hire them as managers?
Yeah. A combination of both. Some were able to live up to the growth and upskill their talent, because it is very important to understand that as a startup grows, people that want to be on the ride along with you need to grow and evolve their leadership skills, evolve their execution skills, like their actual engineering or product skills, whatever they are, like the respective skills, effective communication skills. All of these need to be upskilled. And there are some folks that have lived up to it, that got promoted internally. And there are some folks, unfortunately, who weren't upskilling. And the hardest thing for a founder or like a leader to do is identifying which individual is falling behind, and when do we have to timely make a call, the tough call of letting that person know that, hey, you know what, there's probably a better fit for you elsewhere. Things are just like, you're just not able to catch up to the growth of the company. And that is the hardest thing to do, especially identifying it. And then, so yeah, Jeremy, like, some we promoted internally and some we had to bring from externally. And sometimes like bringing folks from external helps for the company, give like some freshness. It gives like a new way of thinking. It brings about some more energy, like new energy into the team as well. Like, it's not always just, oh, change is always bad. Like, sometimes change is good.
When you do promote people from within to become managers, what is the process for getting them up to speed? It's a very challenging transition because it's not what you've spent the last 10 to 30,000 hours working on. So how do you help people make that transition?
Yeah, so very good question. I think that some of the people that are within the company ready to step on to the next level, they would have already, the biggest sign for them to grow is they would have already started doing tasks that are we call them N+1. We call them tasks that are beyond their like existing expectations. You would have seen positive signs of those folks stepping up and taking on additional new responsibilities anyways, and they're already thriving in those responsibilities. So that's like the biggest sign. And leaders who miss those signs kind of regret like not catching on to that sooner. And sometimes they even make a mistake of bringing someone external that was not needed because the internal folks are just they've shown you those like signs. So I think that was like one of the learnings that we had to go through a harder way, where some of the folks internally we overlooked were just crushing their KPIs and as well as their N+1 KPIs. And they were already thriving and taking on added responsibilities. And sometimes they don't communicate about it. They're not vocal about it, but they just were like crushing their responsibilities. So as a leader, as a good leader, it was my job to kind of notice those. And so going back to your question, that they're ready and that they can transition into it because they've already been doing that. And like a lot of the times in startups that are less than 200 people, like you'll see folks doing that. And in some instances, I've had to tack on some of the added responsibilities just because we had a gap in the process, or we had a gap in the organization, or we had a gap in the execution. The best way to do that is, okay, what resources do you need? Do you need to upskill your communication skills? Do you need to upskill your leadership skills? Do you need to upskill your people management skills? Do you have to upskill your engineering skills so that you can become an engineering manager? So we kind of gave them the resources and did not shortchange on that, to make sure that they're equipped to take on the new role. So those are some ways where we've kind of figured out how we internally promote. And yeah, and in some instances where we don't have to force fit, we just have to bring on external help.
Yeah. So unfortunately, we're going to need to start wrapping up. You've talked about communication, and that's one of the skills that people need to develop as they move up into leadership. What is one piece of communication advice you think everyone can benefit from?
Great question. I think being clear and succinct and concise in what you want the other person to do for you, whether that's strategy or tactic, and how they want to execute. So being very clear, precise, and concise in your communication. And sometimes where communication breaks is if you take things for granted, that what I understand and what my level of understanding is the same as the other person. That's where it kind of breaks down. So never take anything for granted. Just be clear in communicating and saying, hey, this is my expectation and this is what I want from you. Are you on the same page, right? So I think that's what I would say is one advice. It sounds simple, but it is very, very difficult to get to that state where you're just simply breaking down what are the things that you need your team members to deliver for you. I know you asked me one, but I'm giving two. I also strongly suggest to people that communication has a component of oral communication and a written communication. Do not overlook the fact that whatever you're orally communicating, sometimes you have to make a log of it in written communication, because you have to understand that sometimes you don't want to overload the people with like more expectations than what they can achieve, and make a list of, at least give them the time to hit the ones that you're expecting from them before you move on to added things. So it's important that oral and written communications are both going hand in hand and in sync. And sometimes, like, having a record of written communication in some instances goes a long way than just doing a meeting, right? So that's what I would say, my two pieces of advice: simple, clear, concise, and do not take anything for granted as you're communicating orally, and then have a written communication that goes along with your oral communication. I think those, as simple as it sounds, is the hardest to get to.
Yeah, there's a big difference between simple and easy.
Correct.
Simple is clear. It's not always easy to do. So,
Correct.
Kumar, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for joining and for sharing all of your insights.
Yeah, Jeremy, thank you so much for having me on this podcast.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Neuroconversant Leadership. We're over 100 episodes now. And as mentioned, I'm going to be making some changes. So I would love your feedback on what changes I should make, what things I should add, what things I should take away. Please do me a favor and reach out either on LinkedIn or on my email address, which is jdoran@neuroconversantleadership.com. I look forward to hearing your suggestions. Thanks a lot. Until next time, have a great week.